So today is all about phytic acid. So this is known as both an anti-nutrient as well as an antioxidant. So in other words, this is something that we find in plant-based foods that both helps and may also potentially hinder our health. So today I'm going to break it down. I'm going to keep it pretty concise and to the point. And as always, I'm open to hearing questions. And if you have questions, feel free to post them in there. So without further ado, let's dive into phytic acid. What the heck is it and why does it matter? So plant-based foods are obviously very clearly packed full of nutrients and a lot of beneficial vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all of that are going to add to your health, and they're going to allow you to thrive and live a very healthy, happy life. But what is it about phytic acid specifically? And we find phytic acid in nuts, seeds, legumes, and grains. What is it about phytic acid that could potentially be harmful? So phytic acid, also known as phytate. So phytate is the version of phytic acid that is bound to a mineral in the seed. So if ever you hear me or anyone else saying phytate or phytic acid, they can be used interchangeably in this context. So phytic acid is well known for its ability, or its effect rather, on mineral absorption. So you may have heard me say before that you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb. And I think that is so valid. So it's really not so much about what you're putting into your body, because even vegetarians and vegans who eat a very high phytate containing diet can actually have some negative effects happen. So it's really not about what you're eating all the time. It's a lot about what you're absorbing. What kind of nutrients are you absorbing, or what aren't you absorbing rather? So phytic acid has been linked to the deficiency or the malabsorption of iron, zinc, and calcium. So these are three really major minerals that we need. We hear so many people having iron deficiencies or excess iron. That's a blood condition considered, it's called a hemochromatosis, but iron is a really big thing for many of us. Zinc is very closely linked to that, and also calcium. And so this specific nutrient called phytic acid can actually help to block the absorption of these minerals. On the flip side, however, phytic acid has been actually shown and linked to the protection of your kidneys for kidney stones. It's been linked to reduced risk of diabetes, of cardiovascular disease, and even in some cases, cancer. So that's pretty crazy. So we've got this really duality nutrient here that has both really beneficial and potentially very harmful side effects. So because phytic acid is considered an anti-nutrient, this is actually why it can potentially help with a lot of these conditions. Or sorry, I think I said anti-nutrient. I meant antioxidant. So because it's an antioxidant, this is why it can potentially help with a lot of our conditions. So it blocks the ability for free radicals to be developed in the body. And of course, antioxidants are like the antidote to free radicals. Free radicals are chaotic. They go around in our body and they're like punching little holes in all of our cells, and they're basically creating cellular damage, signs of aging, and also they can link to or be connected to a lot of other dis-ease in the body and in the mind. So this is why they can be very, very potentially helpful. So this might be a little confusing at this point, and don't worry, I'm going to break this down even farther, but I wanted to touch on both sides of this, the benefits and potentially the negative side effects of phytic acid. So as I mentioned, vegetarians and vegans, we eat a very high phytate containing foods diet. And this message is very specifically for the vegetarians, the plant-based people, the vegans out there, because there are ways that we can actually amplify our food without having to sacrifice eating these scrumptious foods that could potentially creating a harmful side effect. Now, it is also very important to note that people with underlying health conditions are going to be more affected from this than people with no underlying health conditions. So if you are currently experiencing digestive troubles or disorders, maybe you notice that when you eat nuts, you have like a weird stomach or a knot in your stomach. It's not an allergic reaction, but you might feel really uncomfortable. Same thing with any grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, any of those. If you're having a hard time digesting them, this could be the video for you to help you better understand why these foods are not actually helping you, and why, when you're eating a plant-based diet, why can't I eat beans? That's a really, really big one that I hear with bloating and indigestion and all of that. So this could be very, very closely linked. It's also important to understand that any other underlying conditions like insulin resistance, which is like a precursor to pre-diabetes and diabetes, hemochromatosis, as I mentioned before, which is too much iron of the blood, gut health issues, like all of this, cancer, anything like that, can also contribute to how phytic acid works in your body. So it's very important to understand all of this, that we are all unique and we all have very specific, unique dietary needs and requirements. And so if this is not totally resonating with you, that's okay. Maybe someone that you know, maybe a friend or a family member is going through some issues like this, and this could be something that's very helpful for them to understand about their diet, so they can start to heal that, correct that, and actually be able to enjoy plant-based foods without the digestive or other types of upset that happens. All right, so the main purpose of phytic acid, like why is it even there? Why does plant food like have this good, bad sort of nutrient in there? Its main purpose in a seed is to basically to store phosphorus. And phosphorus is used for the growth and development of a plant once it's been activated, or once the phytic acid has been dissolved. So how does it dissolve then? Because if we think about us, basically we need the same thing. In order to be able to properly use all of the nutrients and all of the benefits of this seed, whatever that seed is, then we need to break down the phytic acid. So the 3 ways that we can do this, and I'm gonna dive into these 3 ways, and I'm super happy to answer questions for you towards the end as well. The first way that you can break down phytic acid is by soaking your food. So, I'll mention those foods again. There's nuts, seeds, grains, legumes. So legumes are beans and pulses and all of those. So all of these foods must be soaked. Now, especially if you're like, nuts might seem like something you don't want to soak. I always buy raw nuts because I feel like they're more, you can do more with them. I would never encourage getting roasted or seasoned nuts, because you can do all of that at home and do it in a much more helpful way. So anytime that you have nuts, let's say you have walnuts and almonds or cashews at home and you like to eat them like trail mix style, I recommend soaking them. Now, I have a soaking chart that I can actually send out. I should put that on my new website. It's not on the new one yet, so I will do that. Mental note. A soaking chart for you, and it tells you how long you want to soak each of these nuts or seeds for before taking them out. So cashews, because they're a lot softer, you want to soak them for less time than an almond, which is closer to 8 to 12 hours or so. And by soaking them, you start to break down some of that phytic acid. You can actually add a little bit of salt or even a little bit of lemon juice, and that's going to help to break it down even farther so that they're more easily digestible. So one way that you could do this on like a regular basis would be the next time you go to the store and you buy a bunch of almonds or whatever it is, if you know that you like to munch on them, soak them overnight. And then the next day you dehydrate them at a very low temperature in your oven. So I think mine goes to 170 Fahrenheit. You put it really low and then you put them on a tray. You can season them with whatever you'd like, whatever spices, salt, whatever you'd like, and then put them at a low temperature for approximately 12 hours. Keep an eye on them, but that low temperature is going to help them dehydrate. And then you'll be able to store them. You're going to have some really healthy nuts that are much easier to digest on your stomach. And that's one way that you can do this. And then you have them ready to go. So it's a one-time thing that you do whenever you need to buy new ingredients. Some other foods that are really good examples of that are great to be soaked. We do this with oats very often. So, I'm sure you've seen these overnight oats recipes and even cooking your oats, right? So heat is another way that we do this. It's just a sort of accelerated way of doing that with oats, but you could do overnight oats if you want to have them cold. You could soak your oats before putting them into a recipe if you wanted to do that, or a smoothie, whatever it is. And another example might be like quinoa, for instance. And it's the same thing with any of our pulses, legumes. They need to be soaked before we consume them. So if you're buying dry legumes, which is another thing I always recommend doing, you're going to want to soak them before you cook them. And that's going to help to break down the phytic acid. It's going to help to make them easier to cook, and you're going to have a much better time digesting them later on as well. So that was soaking. The second method is sprouting. Now what you could do is you could soak and then sprout, which is actually the method that you would have to do. But sprouting is really important as well, because when we sprout and that seed germinates, in other words, then we have activated it. We've got all these live enzymes. We've got so many more, it's so much more potent and full of nutrients, healthy nutrients, antioxidants, all of the good stuff that's going to help you break it down. And you're going to get so much more out of your food. So I've also listed these in orders of the most nutrient packed so that you can amplify your plant-based diet, essentially. Sprouting, you can do this with seeds, grains, legumes, all of them. And they're so, so good. So a few examples of foods, ingredients that you could start to sprout would be lentils. I like to do this with brown and green lentils. You soak them overnight, and then the next day you just you leave them in some water. I did a video on this, and I'll link back to that later as well. I'm making a couple of mental notes here today. You can leave them for about 3 to 5 days, depending on the season and the temperature of your house, and you've got some really lovely lentil sprouts. Those are great on salads. They're great in curries. They're great in anything. You've basically just amplified that food. You could do the same thing with mung beans. So if you've ever seen the bean sprouts that you get in like a pad thai, those are mung beans, and you can do the same thing with those at home. It takes very little time. It's so much less expensive than buying them, and they don't come in plastic. Same thing with alfalfa sprouts, broccoli, radish sprouts, all of those. And you can do the same thing with brown rice as well, which is really interesting. So you just soak the brown rice, you soak it and then sprout it for a few days, and you can eat it just like that. You don't need to go through the process of cooking it, and you've got a nutrient-packed grain. All right, so the third method of reducing phytic acid in your food, and this one is the cream of the crop. I don't know what that saying is now. It's on the tip of my tongue. But fermentation. So fermentation or lacto-fermentation is the most beneficial thing you can do for your food and for your health. So this is a more traditional method. It does take a little bit of time. I know that. However, you're going to completely not only amplify the food that you have, but you're going to add so much, you're going to add bacteria to your food essentially. And that bacteria is going to help to create a really healthy gut microbiome. And we need that in order to have healthy skin, nails, hair, to have a healthy mood, to have a healthy body, all of it. So lacto-fermentation is the friggin' bomb. Highly recommend this. So this is the preferred method. Of course, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 days, or even up to 2 weeks, or even many months if you want to. It depends on what exactly you're fermenting, and also how beneficial you really want it to be. The cool thing with lacto-fermentation is this is a great way to preserve your food as well. As I mentioned, it's the traditional method before refrigeration even came around. And 1 spoonful, so for instance, sauerkraut or kimchi, if you're familiar with these, 1 tablespoon of one of these ferments is it's crazy. It's got 10 times more probiotic benefits than a probiotic capsule that you buy at the store. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. So all you need to do is have 1 spoonful of a ferment with each meal, and you are adding so many good bacteria. You are going to improve your digestion. You're going to improve the bioavailability of your food, meaning that whatever you eat is actually going to get absorbed and utilized so much better than if you did not lacto-ferment it. So that's pretty cool as well. So some examples of nuts, grains, legumes, and seeds that you could potentially do this with, tempeh. So tempeh is very traditionally made with soybeans, and you could do that with soybeans. I've also made tempeh with black bean. You can do it with lentil. I've seen hempeh before. You can do it with all sorts of different grains, legumes, and seeds. So fermenting it over a period of time, you end up with a little brick, and it's really quite nice. It's like a meat alternative, if you will. And I say that because it's got that hardiness, like a nutty hardiness that I think a lot of people, when they're craving something dense in that way, can really appreciate and enjoy. Some other examples would be sourdough bread. So this is a really perfect example of lacto-fermented grains. You're going to see people with celiac disease. And I'm not saying every person, right? It depends on the type of grain that they're using, if it's organic, where we are in the world. But I've heard of people having celiac disease or even gluten sensitivity and intolerance, being able to actually not only eat, but enjoy and feel great after having sourdough, because you have broken down so much of the anti-nutrient aspect that is going to make it so easy and helpful to digest. So that's pretty cool as well. And then of course we have our other ferments like kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, all of those also very highly recommended, though not all of them are nuts, seeds, grains, and legumes, which is our topic today. So Quick recap before I go into some action steps for you to take. So the recap here is that phytic acid is both good and bad. And I think like most things in life, it really depends on your specific needs. It depends on your specific current health situation and also on your goals. So yeah, it can have both negative or positive side effects, but especially vegetarians and vegans, anyone who's plant-based wants to highly focus on amplifying their foods with the three main methods that I mentioned before, which are soaking, sprouting, and fermentation. And then also really important to note that the mineral deficiencies that phytic acid is highly linked to are iron, zinc, and calcium. So if you are experiencing deficiencies in those areas, if you've had blood work done, then this is something that you might want to look into. So action steps. The first thing here is to follow a healthy, balanced diet. And I think that that's going to be my recommendation for pretty much everything ever. But I think it's always worth saying, following a healthy, balanced diet. So when it comes to phytic acid and mineral deficiency, it really only matters with that one meal. So if you're having a handful of nuts that are not soaked, then during that meal, we'll call it, then you are going to be reducing the amount of minerals you're absorbing. It doesn't last throughout the day. It doesn't count for our subsequent meals. But if you are plant-based and you're eating a lot of unsoaked, unsprouted, unfermented nuts, grains, seeds, and legumes, then throughout the day and over time, this can create mineral deficiency. So this is why we might see a lot of plant-based people who are having iron deficiency, is because they're not actually amplifying their food, right? And this is where a lot of people think they need to start eating steak or something like that. But really the truth is plant foods have far more iron than animal-based foods. Hands down, that's a fact. So how do we amplify the food? Making sure that you're preparing your foods properly, taking the time. And if that means setting aside 2 to 5 hours a week and then just knowing, okay, so like today I'm going to do 45 minutes of meal prep, or next time I go to the grocery store, before I put my food back in the fridge, I'm going to prepare it, make sure that it's ready to go, so that I'm not sitting in this position where I'm hungry and all I have are unprepared foods and my digestion is suffering, right? So balanced, healthy diet, making sure that you're prepping your food, taking the time to do that, because you matter. And if you're not comfortable and you're not feeling good in your body, then how is it possible to go ahead and enjoy life to the fullest, right? And that's all that I ever want for anyone, is just to feel so good that you can say hell yeah to all the situations, to all of the fun and events all of the time. All right, so that about wraps it up for phytic acid today. I hope that this was informative for you. And if you have not yet swiped my ultimate plant-based checklist yet, I do recommend doing that. If you're watching this on Instagram, you can find the link in my bio. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will post the link below. This is a really comprehensive guide to a plant-based pantry. You're going to find not only a ton of ingredients, over 100 ingredients in there, you're going to find the recommendations on how to use them, how to source them, and also some of the health benefits and why you would choose to use those. So if you haven't checked that out, I do recommend doing that now. And I would love to hear your feedback on it. Let me know if there's anything you feel like I missed, because as I was going through it, I realized there are some foods that I just, there's so many amazing plant-based foods out there. So let me know if there's some foods you want me to add to it. If you feel like you really want to know about this specific ingredient, super happy to do that for you. Anyways, I love you, and I will catch you on the flip side.